Near the end of another shocking day of wild, windy, hot and atrocious conditions, coupled, of course, with wildfires in some places beyond comprehension. What a way to see the year off. For those in East Gippsland in Victoria and the south coast of New South Wales, it'll be a New Year's Eve they sadly will never forget. I'll cross to Bega very shortly because this is where out-of-control fires have forced residents to flee onto beachfronts, destroyed properties and had police and locals searching for missing members of their communities. The same applies in East Gippsland. It is just a sickly feeling for families and neighbours. Bear in mind how close these neighbourhoods and communities are to look for people they probably spent many, many years in the neighbourhood with. As we now know, 2 of those missing people in New South Wales have died. A father and son from just outside of Cambargo who were trying to defend their property. 2 further lives lost, which brings the total for this bushfire season to 11. Now, a 72-year-old man is missing. That is the official word, but a friend of his has contacted me just before coming to air to say that he too has been lost to fire, trapped in his vehicle at Ballowra. That is not confirmed, but that is the information that I have been told only a short time ago. Like most Australians today, I couldn't help but be moved by the circumstances and the details of the latest volunteer firefighter to be killed, the 3rd this season. A freak firestorm literally inverted the truck that Sam McPaul was travelling in whilst trying to save cattle near the Green Valley fire in Jingellic. He was killed instantly.
He leaves behind, tragically, a beautiful wife, Megan, who is pregnant with their first child that's due on the 4th of May. As you would expect, the family is grieving, and it's been a very difficult night, and I would be fair to say I don't even think the comprehension has set in yet at the enormity of the tragedy and the loss.
You've got to give it to the RFS chief, Shane Fitzsimmons. Here he is on each occasion having to tell the public via the media who's died, the circumstances in which they have perished, and also the circumstances that they leave behind. And how could you, without feeling for the family involved as the RFS chief, not come to some kind of emotional grief as he did in that press conference today? Now, despite how bone dry the land is, especially in these semi-rural holiday villages in areas like Bateman's Bay along the south coast of New South Wales and Mallacoota in East Gippsland, Victoria, I still can't believe, as I mentioned on the program last night, how so many people refuse to accept an order to evacuate. And the point is, neither can authorities.
Early this morning, and when I say early, about 8 o'clock this morning, the sirens were activated, so everybody in that community that had a plan to go to the beach are at the beach. We are aware, and as the Premier has said, some people have chosen not to take that advice and remain in their homes in those isolated communities. We won't be putting trucks into those areas, but they were fully briefed and are fully aware before that fire impacted on that community.
So these people were virtually left on their own, and that is not a slight on firefighters or the commanders of those firefighting units. They have to fight at the fire front to prevent the fire from spreading to areas of the villages and then, of course, to the people near the coastline. But you can only imagine that these people have never truly witnessed what happens when fires race through valleys and towns. They are unstoppable. And the burning embers travel just as fast and for several kilometres ahead of the fire front, not to mention the suffocating smoke that fills the air. And I think credit where credit is due today. Although the Victorian Premier, Daniel Andrews, spent most of his state's bushfire crisis on holidays, he did return today and was not playing politics as he dealt with the emergency alongside the Prime Minister and the Australian Defence Force.
There's no politics in this, there's no intergovernmental stuff. Everybody chips in, everybody gets with the program. And I just wanted to make it clear that I'd had a series of texts with the PM this morning, and I'll speak with him in the next hour or so, just to relay to him the briefing that I've just received.
Now, just in terms of the detail of the assistance that the Australian Defence Force will give Victoria, the Defence Minister, Linda Reynolds, has tweeted in the past 40 minutes that she has spoken with the Prime Minister and authorised ADF to deploy extra assets to the Victorian fires. They include 3 helicopters, which, as was explained by the Premier of Victoria today, are much larger than the helicopters used by Fire and Rescue, for instance. 1 aircraft will fly to East Sale. HMAS Choules and MV Sycamore will sail to East Gippsland. A joint task force has been stood up with Army personnel and liaison officers. That is direct from the Defence Minister. But back to the actual firefighters. It is astonishing that we've only lost 3 volunteers. Sad as that clearly is, it is astonishing considering the ferocity of these fires. And as RFS Chief Shane Fitzsimmons also pointed out this afternoon, the volunteers take their tasks very personally because the areas they risk their lives in are their own.
Under these horrendous conditions, they feel guilty. They beat themselves up because they haven't done enough. They feel they haven't done enough. But the reality is, as we're seeing these conditions unfold out there today, you can only save and protect so much. And what a remarkable job they're doing in some pretty horrendous conditions, saving and protecting as many and as much as they possibly can. Our highest priority has to be the safety and welfare of firefighters. The last thing we want is people unnecessarily putting themselves at risk to try and save buildings, because we can rebuild buildings. What we've got to focus on constantly is the preservation of life as the highest order. Property and the environment follow thereafter.
Now, do you notice that the fire chief had his priorities right? Life, property, then the environment. That won't sit too well with the Greenies, of course, but that is the proper order. And the Prime Minister too was not dwelling on the grief or drama from today's battles, because there was plenty of that, but the exceptional spirit Australia calls on and Australia delivers when disaster strikes.
I wish we had better news on New Year's Eve, but one news we can always take comfort in is the amazing spirit of Australians. We have faced these disasters before and we have come through. We have prevailed. We have overcome. That is the spirit of Australians. That is the spirit that is on display. That is a spirit that we can celebrate as Australians, whether on a difficult day like this or any other day. That's what we can take comfort in, each other and the amazing country in which we're blessed to live. We can always give thanks for that.
I thought that was well said. The nation is experiencing great shock and fear this season. Fear which probably hit a climax today in Victoria and New South Wales. And no doubt there'll be further days of extreme weather in the first 2 months of the new year 2020. In those circumstances, it really is pretty tough tonight to say Happy New Year. But let's hope and pray that at least it's happier than the closing stages of 2019.